Well, hello and thanks for having me here. Has anyone seen any of these presentations before? No, that's fine. So the old jokes will keep flowing tonight. The word hello is really quite interesting because it reminds me of my father-in-law when he was in the RAF in the 1950s. He was based at Norfolk. And he met these two Danish ladies who couldn't understand his Paisley patois. And they asked him, what's the Scots word for hello? And he said, kich. So I hope this isn't an indication of what you're going to hear tonight. But anyway, this is really quite a venue for me because I've been doing these talks probably over the last 3 or 4 years, and I've done well over 30 of them now, but this is one of the more exotic places. Now, I did one in London for the London SNP, and it was an Episcopal Church, St Anne's, which is in Soho, and I did have to think of my mother and what, her eyes would have been raised thinking I had done a performance in Soho. But anyway, it was quite a night because you would imagine, the centre of UK power and establishment, that they could actually afford a good projector. And I had offered to take my projector down with me, but they said, no, we'll have an excellent projector there. So I didn't bother with it. And I got down, and you have never seen such an old projector in your life. And despite the fact that I was going to say a congregation, but a meeting of say 60, there were 2 IT specialists, but they couldn't get it working. So they had me on my feet for 2.5 hours without any slides or anything. So that's it just shows you that London's got a lot to learn in many respects. So anyway, I've been a solicitor, conveyancing solicitor basically for the last 42 years. I've been involved in the nationalist movement since the 1970s when I was a student at Edinburgh University. I'm currently convener of the SNP's Dumbarton Constituency Association. I'm a director of business for Scotland, and after the last referendum, I wanted to prove that we could show that we could raise all the public finance that we require in Scotland without the assistance or subsidy from down south. And I've always been interested in the idea of land as a source of public funding. So I joined the Scottish Land Review Group, who have been on the go for some time, and if you get a chance to go to any of their meetings, I would strongly advise you to go to them. But I thought what they were proposing was not politically saleable, so I went away to work out another way, and this is basically the reason for this tonight. But of course, things have moved on, and we now have Andrew Wilson's Sustainable Growth Commission, which is obviously something of considerable debate within the party and beyond. And as a result of what I propose, it's really sort of turned into a sort of an alternative growth commission. So I'll go through the slides, and at the end of that, feel free to ask me any questions you may have. Right, so we've got Andrew's premise that Scotland will require to borrow on the international markets to fund our public services. We've got to demonstrate economic competence to obtain credit in the international markets, lower interest rates. We've got to assume part of the UK debt. Immigration will be a key element of economic growth, and we will use sterling for some time to demonstrate our prudence. The alternative premise is that Scotland is a nation in credit. We decide our own currency. We raise all our public funding without borrowing. We vanquish poverty through a universal assistance income. We liberate our entrepreneurial spirit. We establish the world's first truly property-owning democracy. And we address the challenge of globotics. Now, for those who don't know, globotics is basically the effects of globalization and robots basically on our way of life in the coming years, which will be probably more dramatic than any other revolution that there has ever been in the world. And we provide a better family life. So, Scotland's land excluding the seabed, it's about 78 billion square metres. But because the area known as urban, which I'll define shortly, we've taken that as a factor of 2, given that most properties are more than 1 floor in height. So we assume for this exercise that there's over 85 billion square metres in Scotland. Now, Scotland's total annual public expenditure, according to GERS, is about £73 billion. We can argue about GERS, but the fact that we've got this figure, I'm quite happy to work with it. And that's the figure which is spent by the UK, Scottish and local governments in Scotland over the period of a year. So it's all public, basically all public spending in Scotland. We need more, not just to address the austerity agenda, but also to provide for this worthwhile universal citizens' income and transform our infrastructure. So I've increased it to a nice round figure of £100 billion. So how do we raise all our public funding from our land? Well, the suggestion in this case is to replace all taxes, whether UK, Scottish, local, with a model of annual ground rent, charged per square metre on land, roof and floor space, levied according to agreed land types. So I'm just calling it AGFFR for the sake of shortness. Now, note for simplicity, the presentation uses 4 basic land types, but these could be increased or varied as desired by the policy makers. So, the 4 land types are rough grazing, forest and woodland, arable and urban. And for this exercise, basically urban is all non-agricultural buildings and also all buildings within areas which are served by a public sewerage system. So, what to consider when setting a rate for each land type? Well, most folk live and work in urban areas and/or work in urban areas. Arable land is generally more productive than rough grazing, likewise for forest and woodland. Most public amenities and infrastructure are in urban areas, and they require, because of intense use, increased management, replacement and repair. However, urban areas increase greater wealth through the knowledge economy from a smaller area, but there is an imperative that we protect and repopulate rural Scotland. So, the suggested rates per land types. For rough grazing, it's 1.5 pence. For woodland, it's 4 pence. Same for arable. But for urban, it's a whopping £7.124 per square metre. And you will notice in the right-hand column that it's nearly 98.5% of the total £100 billion is generated from these urban land types. Okay, so how to calculate your AGFFR? You measure the footprint of each floor of your buildings, you add the area of your roof, add the area of your garden or land, add the area of any pavement and or publicly owned verge outside it, you add half the area of the roadway, you multiply the total by the applicable rates, you make your return online to Revenue Scotland, and you pay it in full or say over 10 months of the year. And that's just a wee illustration of what we're talking about there, the roof area, first floor, if it's just a first floor, the ground floor and garden, public footpath, the road. It should just say half the road actually, and that's basically how you would add up your square meterage and then multiply it by the rate concerned. So there are some variations to standalone properties. In rural settings, only non-agricultural buildings would attract the urban rate. In urban settings, the combined property and gardens would attract the urban rate. Liability for common property, so if you're in a tenement flat and there are 6 flats in the block, you'd pay your own, you'd calculate your own floor space for your flat, and then you would pay a share of the common areas, the close, the landings, the stairs, any back court, a share of the pavement, and also half the road. Landowners of urban type properties would be entitled to recover the full AGFR from their tenants, and landowners of agricultural land would be entitled to recover the AGFR levied on the land. Now, why you'd make your AGFR return? First of all, there would be spot checks and returns by Revenue Scotland, with hefty penalties for inaccurate or dishonest returns. The register would be public, so everyone's return would be transparent and largely self-policing, and whistleblowing would not be discouraged. So that if you lived in a semi-detached wimpy house, you could then go in and see what your neighbour return was, and if they were taking the mickey, then you could decide whether to let somebody know. There'd be no tax evasion or avoidance, and there'd be 100% collection, unlike most taxes, because a charge would be registered against all titles at the start of each year, which would prevent their sale or mortgage until the AGFR was paid. And if it remained unpaid for 3 years, I'm suggesting the property could be repossessed by Revenue Scotland, just like a mortgage lender, for example, and they would then be able to sell the property to recover the outstanding debt with interest and legal costs, and any balance would go back to the former owner. Now here's some examples of your total annual householder business contribution. Tenant of an arable farm of 100 acres, roughly you're looking at probably £11,553. 100 acre rough grazing farm would be about 4,600 odds. A small house with garden is about 2,000. Small flat, 1 bedroom flat, about 540. Similarly, a small shop. Rough grazing of 687,820,000 square metres would be 10,317,300. And I put that in as an illustration because that's roughly the rough land which Mr. Anders Poulsen, the Danish billionaire, owns in Scotland, and for which he doesn't have to pay anything to either the Scottish Government or the British Government, and unless he's got to pay a modest amount for some of his stocking, for rates for his stocking, he won't be paying very much to local authority either. Now that figure does not include the urban rate which he would be liable to pay on buildings within his estate. It's interesting to know, however, that he has to make a return to the Danish Treasury for the land which he owns abroad, and that's a rule which the Danish tax authorities have, that if you own land outside Denmark, you've also got to make a return if you're a Danish taxpayer and Danish citizen. So this is where it really got interesting when I started to do the figures, and I really couldn't believe it, but I have done the figures several times and nobody's actually challenged them. So a person on average earnings of 26,500, you currently pay roughly income tax, national insurance, nearly 4,500, council tax, I put in a figure for that, Scottish water rates, road tax, VAT. They normally say that you pay about £5,000 in VAT if you're earning average earnings. So your total current taxes are roughly over £11,000 a year. But if you were paying for a modest house, AGFR, an urban rate's only 2,000 odds, so you'd actually save a staggering over £9,000 a year. So if you're thinking of all these foreign holidays you're now going to go and book, you'll get fed up going on holiday with the amount of savings, so you will want to actually reinvest more of this land today or this money in Scotland if we go ahead with a system such as this. Anyway, to give you some high-profile examples, Balmoral Castle, in order to preserve the anonymity of the owner, we'll call her Senga. You wouldn't believe it, but a current band H for the castle, and the annual council tax is actually less than £2,700 because she's got her own she's got her own private sewerage system, so she doesn't have to pay so much to Scottish Water and water rates. Under this system, since I took into account the fact that we had to have a useful universal citizen's income, she'd be paying just £100,000 a year or thereby. BA Systems in Glasgow, they've got 2 yards, Scotstoun and Govan, and currently they pay commercial rates of just short of £500,000. The AGFR, however, will be about £10 million. But they have, because they are part of a London registered company, through GERS, their profits from their work in Scotland, are not allocated to Scotland. So they could make a considerable saving on the tax that they're paying just now if they were actually a company registered in Scotland, and of course it would be to their interest to reinvest that money in Scotland, given the favourable conditions for entrepreneurship using this system. 180 hectares in Easterhouse. Just before the SNP won Glasgow, the Labour administration announced that they were actually going to develop over a period of 20 years 180 hectares of Easterhouse. Now, this is ground which has been lying fallow for about 40 years. They demolished the houses, the old corporation demolished the houses, but did nothing with the land. They left up the street lights, the streets, and they grassed it over, but they wouldn't even allow the people to use the land even for allotments. So it's been sitting there all that time, not contributed a penny towards the environment or the quality of life of the folk in Easterhouse. If AGFFR was in place, then without development, it would have contributed about £13 million a year to public funds. If they develop it with mostly two-storey premises, there'll be about £40 million a year will be generated for public funds, and that's some. And this is all over the city, and other cities, also have large areas where they've just been left fallow because the council have been under no pressure to actually do anything with the land over the years. Whereas with AGFFR, the public sector as well as the private sector have to pay the rent, so it makes them have to think about land in a completely different way. Just to give you some more wee examples, this is a bungalow in Aviemore. The AGFFR is just 2,300. This is one, since we're in the northeast, I thought better do something about C9. So in Sandend, this wee cottage here, and it's got a wee chalet at the side of it. So the AGFFR on that will be about £1,424. Alderman Road in Glasgow, ex-council house. It's quite a narrow house, but it's got a long garden, etc. And the AGFFR on that comes in at 3,190. In Argyll, Rick St Andrews, it's a newbie development, very tight site. It's a very modest £1,100. And Crow Road, up to Annie's Land Cross in Glasgow, big Edwardian flats. There's a lot of common areas at the back of that too, so it's working out per flat at just over £5,000. Balmullo, I did this presentation in Balmullo a while back, and I was just driving into the local community centre where it was done, and I noticed this house. As you can see, the guy's really keen in his garden. And I calculated that it would be about £6,500 for this modern property. North Anderson Drive, I think this property, a really nice 1920s bungalow at the top of North Anderson Drive, is up for sale just now. So I went on in expectation of coming here, and the AGFFR would be about 15,000 odds on that one. Marybank in Cooper, this is a large Georgian house. It's got floors and extensive gardens in Cooper itself, and it's £15,500. Now, Pittodrie Stadium, I know that Aberdeen are leaving Pittodrie, but I thought just as a farewell gift, I'm just going to show you what the annual or the AGFFR is likely to be on that, and it would be about £764,000. Now, against that, you've got to consider that Aberdeen wouldn't have to pay employers' national insurance contributions or any other sort of taxes. So probably it would, they would still be ahead of the game with the likes of AGFFR as opposed to all the other taxes that they pay just now. I've not worked out what the new one is going to be, but I'll certainly be able to do that for you if anyone was interested. This is the former headquarters of the Scottish Cooperative Society in Glasgow, the corner of Morrison Street and Paisley Road. And this building was an eyesore for donkey's years. And the Belfast company who owned it didn't pay anything by way of commercial rates or anything to the city council. The place went up on fire. It was fire brigade and all the rest of it were out. Still the folk that owned it still haven't paid a contribution towards that. They got their insurance money to demolish the building. It's just a hole in the ground now. But if there had been a payment due under AGFFR, they'd been paying roughly about £150,000 a year. And I think if that had been the case, there wouldn't be a hole in the ground now. Okay, this wee place in just above north of Aviemore, quite a wee bit of land, but it's not connected to the public sewerage system, so it's just over the £7,000. Now, Jordan Hill School in Glasgow, I think, is the only state school in Scotland which is not, or which is directly funded by the Scottish Government and not a local authority. And it's got a junior school, a senior school, and quite handsome playing fields. Their AGFFR would be just £434,000, which again equates to what their national insurance contributions are for their staff. Cromlech and Sandbank. Sandbank, if you don't know, is close to Dunoon, and I was doing a presentation there year past at Christmas, and it was just my luck that the owner of this house was in the audience. And he started telling me, could you afford to pay an annual ground rent of £30,000? And he started telling everybody what he earned. So everybody now in Dunoon and Sandbank knows this guy's business. And I kind of said to him, I said, well, you know, it's a handsome property. How many rooms does it have? He says, 12. And I said, how many folk are living in the house? He said, I've just done it myself. And I said, well, you can only live in one room at a time. You know, would you maybe think either to get it split or sell a bit of the ground, because there's an awful lot of ground with it, or do something like that? I said, because basically, you know, come the right of ownership of a property, there's also the obligation to maintain. You know, and if you've got a problem maybe maintaining something like that, maybe it's trying to say to you, push you along the road to think, well, you know, maybe I should be downsizing or looking for something that is more affordable. So he must have taken those words to heart, because he's now sold the property. Rothy Marcus, again, apart from the stocking, Rothy Marcus estate doesn't pay anything for their land. Under AGFFR, they'd be paying, you know, £1.5 million a year. Helensburgh, I live just north of Helensburgh, and if you don't know Helensburgh, Helensburgh was developed in the late 18th, early 19th century in a grid system. So round all the roads there are these verges with nice blossom trees which separate really all the houses. But the verges are not owned by the owners of the houses. They're owned by Luss Estates, which is the big estate company of the Cahoon family. Now, the Cahoon family, despite the fact that they own all that ground, they refuse to cut the grass and they refuse to maintain the trees. So the owners of the houses, or the local authority in some cases, they're expected to maintain the verges, and there's a charitable trust that maintains the trees. However, with AGFFR, Luss Estates would then have to pay over £1 million a year for the ownership of the verges. Because what they do just now is that if somebody that owns a house wants to put in a new access, even just to get the right of the access over the verge, Luss Estates charges them between £15,000 and £25,000 just to say yes. Right, so the consequences for you: there'd be no tax on income and endeavour, no tax on purchased goods and services, no tax on inheritance or capital. There'd be no need for tax advisors, so if there's any chartered accountants in the room, tough. Save a hell of a lot of money, save me a hell of a lot of money too. No council tax or commercial rates, no business taxation, no adverse effect on the market value of your home or business premises, but there is certainty of how much you'd have to pay in tax or rent every year. Just now you don't, because if your tax is on income or your tax is on spending, you don't know at the start of the year how much these are going to be throughout the year. However, you would know precisely at the start of the year what you are paying with AGFFR. You'd have a much higher disposable income for you to spend, invest and save as you see fit. There's the opportunity for you to buy land, either as an individual or communities, at low prices, provided you pay the AGFFR levied on it. And with the calculations I have made, every man, woman and child in Scotland would receive a weekly citizens' income of £200, replacing most pensions and social security. And if 10% of everyone's weekly citizens' income was invested from a menu of Scottish businesses through the Scottish Investment Bank, everyone would have a personal interest in our economy. So the consequences for the big landowners, well, initially might not be able to sleep at night. There'll be a rush by them to offload uneconomic land and buildings, thus initially reducing the market value substantially. They won't keep land which doesn't provide sufficient income to pay the AGFFR, but they will benefit from their other assets not subject to inheritance or other wealth or capital taxes. And it will be in their interest to develop, diversify and farm land they retain. Another thing is that they won't claim ownership of land which is unproductive, which they presently do due to unspecific title boundaries, so will overcome the major impediment to the completion of the land register. Now I put that in because historically, likes of the Duke of Argyll's titles, all it said was all and hail the lands of Argyll. There were no plans, but Argyll's a big place. And so if you were having a dispute with the Duke of Argyll about who owned what, you'd have to have a pretty definitive plan showing what you owned, otherwise you'd be in a hiding to nothing, because he basically owns it all under exception of anything else that's been sold off and handed over the years. The other thing that the land register just now is trying to complete the digitalisation of it by 2024, and the major impediment to completion of that are these historic titles, because they're trying to agree with the landowners what exactly do they own and what they don't own. And that's not just the private owners, they have an issue with the Forestry Commission. They can't agree with the Forestry Commission what the Forestry Commission says it owns, and also Network Rail, because Network Rail doesn't know what it owns, because most of their titles go back to Victorian times and the development of the railways, and most of these title deeds didn't have a plan, and if they did have a plan then it was so inaccurate that it's not worth basically the paper it's written on to a large extent. So these are things, you know, which would help, AGFFR would actually help the completion of the land register, because where there are big areas of land, to make the return would have to be accompanied with a plan, and if it was accompanied by a plan, then that would be what would be registered as in the ownership of these big landowners, and basically they then couldn't say that they owned something which they didn't own. Right, the consequences to local authorities: they could increase their budgets and devolution of powers, because they could levy their own rates if they wished. It would save them employers' national insurance contributions and other tax liabilities, but they would need to manage or dispose of their own land and property portfolio to meet the AGFFR charge. So because of the release of land like this, it would help housing shortage by releasing surplus land. There'd be reduced bureaucracy, and there would be a major reduction in empty properties and derelict sites. And the consequences for Scotland are that there's certainty of source and amount of public revenue. There's substantially more public and private funds to invest in Scotland. All wealth from our seas can be invested in a sovereign fund for future generations, because I haven't included that in the calculation, so we've still got that. We can become a truly property owning and sharing democracy. It encourages businesses to set up and invest in Scotland, and it encourages immigration of high spending individuals subject to the conditions we impose. That will be up to us to decide on what terms we allow people to come to our country. On what basis that was agreed. Our public funding, our public finances could always be in credit. It reduces the bureaucracy of government, and it ends the black market, because most black market is caused through income tax evasion or VAT or something like that. Well, that wouldn't be an issue then. And I've called it Scotland's Darien Revenge, because you all know the Panama Papers. Well, you know, apart from Panama hats, you know, they wouldn't need to really worry about folk having to go to Panama or other tax havens, because basically there is the one rent that requires to be paid. And with the introduction of the universal citizens' income, we vanquish poverty, and we also have a substantial reduction in the administration of social security services. So, understanding the source of this substantial increase in public revenue, we've got huge areas of privately owned derelict and empty land and floor space in urban Scotland. Huge area of publicly owned land and floor space estimated at 9 billion square metres, not contributing to the national revenue. Apart from buildings, basically all of rural and urban land contributes nothing directly to the national revenue. And there are areas and properties owned by charities like National Trust that don't directly contribute to the national revenue either. And there are significant areas of public open space with no thought as to their ongoing stewardship and value as a public asset and funding source. So, the options under devolution. As AGFFR is paid directly to Revenue Scotland, there is no need for any involvement with the HMRC, and I know with having discussions with Derek Mackay, that is a real pain for him. Revenue Scotland could reimburse all or part of UK imposed taxes to Scottish personal and corporate taxpayers through the funds generated by the Barnett Consequentials. And we could give councils the opportunity to charge their own land type rates by designating all areas of Scottish Government responsibility as local. Now, how Scotland becomes a true property owning democracy, an entrepreneurial dynamo? Well, 10% of every citizen's universal citizen's income must be invested in a menu of Scottish-based enterprises each year through guaranteed bonds with the Scottish Investment Bank. The citizens could cash in their bond at the end of each year, but at least 1 year's investment would have to be in the menu at any one time. That would generate a minimum of £5.5 billion of Scottish money to be invested every year. Everyone would then have a stake in the country's economy. Scottish entrepreneurs would have a constant source of funding, loan funding, and young people will be able to build up a substantial capital to help them. And the menu of funds can both be nationally and locally allocated. And it frees the creatives and entrepreneurs to develop skills and businesses and trade globally and locally, knowing that they have got basic funds to cover their sort of everyday expenses. So, how does AGFFR address the challenge of robotics? Well, it gives everyone enough to live a guaranteed financially independent life, even if robotics and the spread of technology replaces most human jobs. I mean, there are some estimates that up to 70% of existing jobs will be replaced by robots. Now, there will be some jobs that we can't even think about just now that will replace them, but this is going to be a seismic and really considerable change within the next kind of 10, 20, 30 years, and it's something that we should really be thinking about and preparing for now. The ability to own or lease areas of land at a very modest AGFFR rate of say £61 for an acre of marginal land allows folk to use the land in free time for recreational or business purposes. As our public funding is obtained from our land and not through the variables such as tax on income or consumption, significant changes in employment will not affect the actual amount, the rent take of AGFFR. And over the next 50 years, occupations sheltered most from robotics are creative, intellectual and social ones. So the universal citizen's income gives people the financial ability and time to develop knowledge and expertise through higher and further education. And by harnessing robotics to significantly reduce the working week, but maintain salaries and introduce the UCI allows people to enjoy a better life-work balance, to improve family life, even to increase our birth rate, and to reduce the strain on our public services. So the options under independence are by funding all public services through AGFFR. Scotland does not rely on the volatility of oil revenues, but still has them for our National Sovereign Fund. We don't rely on the largesse of the UK taxpayer. We don't impose any personal or business taxation. We increase public revenue. We can still impose behavioural taxes and or minimum pricing, possibly targeted for specific purposes, such as drink, alcohol and cigarettes. It avoids government borrowing. It's not affected by what currency we use, but we have control over our economy and it encourages spending within Scotland. So, why can it be introduced very quickly? Well, Revenue Scotland already exists and collects some taxes and integrates already with the land register. The software for online registration also exists. There's already online facilities to measure the extent of property, even if you don't want it to out your tape measure, such as daftlogic.com. There's no need for cooperation with UK Government or HMRC, as all payments go direct to Revenue Scotland, so the Scottish Government has control over all the money. The land register has a cadastral map of Scotland, so properties are easily identifiable in that, and also it's simple. Now, I'm just showing you Scotland's geological map, and the reason I show you that is that most title deeds in Scotland, you own your own home or property, you don't own the minerals under it. The titles for the minerals are generally held by maybe the family of the original landowner, the kirk, the local authority, or the Scottish Government or the UK Government. So there would be the possibility whereby we could have a separate rent rate for the ownership of the mineral rights. Exclusive economic area. The area that's included within the red boundary is Scotland under international law, because it is governed by Scots law. It's 5 times the area of our land, but of course at the bottom of the seabed there is land, and of course the Scottish Government could look to be charging an annual ground rent or something similar on that land. I think I'm right in saying that apart from Norway, if you consider the exclusive economic areas within Europe, we're the second largest country in Europe. So when you hear a politician saying we're we, tell them to behave themselves. Now, what's this really about? I said it was about public funding, and it is, but it's more than that. It's the stewardship of land to maximise its economic, social and environmental potential. We're reconnecting urban Scots with the land. Land provides an outlet if we have more time in our hands due to robotics. Dependable public funding from land allows us to choose a better life-work balance. It's also true independence and a new type of economy not driven by the vagaries of the global market, but enables us to be an even more significant global player. And it provides a real possibility of a real democratic ownership of our assets. And finally, the Great Steward of Scotland. Currently that is one of Senga's son's titles, but I actually think the Great Steward of Scotland is the Scottish Government, and the Scottish Government, has ultimate responsibility for our land, and if they wish to, they could start introducing this now, before independence, and I think it would be a considerable asset to us in our fight for that. And happiness, are you a believer? Now the reason I put happiness in was I was at a Nordic Horizons seminar in Edinburgh that Leslie Riddick had arranged just a fortnight ago, and there was a Danish MP, Social Democrat MP, who was telling us about how the Danish welfare system was developed, and it actually happened, it was agreed on the same day that Hitler became Chancellor of Germany in 1932. And despite the irony of that, basically what happened was that the leaders of the political parties then got round the table, they opened a bottle of whiskey, and they actually discussed how they would develop a social security system. But they didn't do it on the basis of, well, we think there should be this benefit or that benefit or whatever. They said, how can we make as many people as possible as happy as possible? So it's a question of happiness and how we can actually make life happier and better for as many people as possible. And finally, just put this one up. If you want to find out what you'd roughly be paying an ag for yourself, by all means email me. All I need is your name, property address, your postcode and your house type, and I can give you an estimate or a guesstimate of what it would likely to be under this model. So that's the presentation. Thank you for your attendance, and I'll be delighted to any questions that you may have. Thank you.
I've got a question. That was fantastic. Really enjoyed it. Quite exciting as well. But my question, maybe I missed a bit in there, but for example, if you have a 3-bedroom house in Seaton, which is like the east end of Aberdeen, you'd be paying the same as somebody with a 3-bedroom house in the wealthy West End. Would that be right?
Well, as I said, for simplicity's sake, I really just, I've got the 4 land types. It would be up to policy owners or policy developers to decide, whether we had different rates for different types of property or different areas on there. But as I say, for simplicity's sake, it's just showing the 4 types. four types of land. For example, arable land, I think there are 5 different degrees of arable land, and we've got the golden triangle of North Fife and Angus. So you could actually put a different rate for these different areas, but for illustrative purposes, I haven't sort of divided these things up.
Do you want another couple of questions, and then we'll have a break? Okay, just another couple, and then we'll have a break and come back for more questions.
Yes.
I was just thinking about, you said, problems with the old title deeds and proving ownership. And the incentive is obviously then, if you want to prove ownership, you have to pay for it. But what's the kind of, have you made any calculations on what you might have for orphan land, like no one claims ownership to common land that no one claims ownership?
Well, actually, every bit of land in Scotland is owned by somebody or something. So let's take, for example, there was one of these blind trusts that people get concerned about that might own a bit of land in Scotland. Sorry? Oh, sorry. No,
Want the question repeated?
All right, sorry. The lady was asking about land which maybe there isn't an owner for, and what would happen in that particular case. Okay. So I'm just saying that every bit of land in Scotland is owned by somebody. It might be difficult discovering who the beneficial owner is, such as in these trusts that are maybe in Grand Cavan or something like that. But for this exercise, it really wouldn't matter in that case, because they would still be liable to pay it. And if it wasn't paid within the 3 years, then the Scottish Government would have the power to repossess it anyway, regardless of basically whether they declared an interest in it or not. There will be land where after 3 years nobody's paid anything, and it might be that they don't claim it because for umpteen different reasons. For example, if somebody who owned land had died and there had never been an executor or a will, or they didn't know who the next of kin was, then it's quite possible that the actual owner died some time ago and it's just sitting and there's been no request for, nobody's ever challenged or claimed it. So in that case, that land would fall to the Scottish Government anyway, under the a person known as the Queen's and Lord Treasurer's Remembrancer. That basically is the agent for the Crown in Scotland, where land or property cannot be individually claimed. So that would fall to the Scottish Government, and the Scottish Government could then decide whether to sell that land, hand it over to somebody, develop it themselves, or something along those lines. But if they decided to hold on to it, they would need to pay the annual ground rent on it anyway. So the funds were still coming. So it would be in their interest to do something with it, rather than just hold on to it, do nothing with it.
Can I ask a follow-up to that question?
Yes,
So you're very heavily changing the incentive for whether not to hold land. So you're presumably going to get a lot of people who are holding not very valuable land, who are probably just going to sort of tear up their title deeds and decide they don't want anything to do with it because it's an ongoing drain on their expenses rather than something they're holding to make a profit on. So you're probably going to get a lot of land that is then handed back to the Scottish Government, which I'm fine with. But presumably that affects the taxation figures. You're losing a lot of projected income for people handing the land back.
Well, first of all, you usually find that people that own a lot of land, some of it is not worth an awful lot from a market value point of view, or there's not an awful lot that they think they can do with it, but they also own bits which are very valuable and have quite a substantial market value. Now, if these are held under the one title, they wouldn't be able just to avoid paying for the bit that they don't like. They can't just hand that back. So their whole asset will be under threat of being repossessed if they don't pay it. The other thing is that the actual rates are really quite modest for rural Scotland, and that's basically because you've got to watch what rate you charge, because regardless of whether you own 45,000 acres or you own 1 acre, the rate of a similar type of land has got to be more or less the same. Otherwise, we're going to be flooded with court cases under the European Convention on Human Rights by landowners saying, well, we're being treated in a different way from other people. And that's not what's happening here, because what's happening is they're being charged at exactly the same rate as somebody that's got an acre as opposed to 45,000 acres. The other thing is that the most valuable land or property from a public funding point of view is actually in urban Scotland. Now, I don't know what it's like in Union Street now, but there was an awful lot of empty properties in Union Street, or empty floors and all the rest of it. The owners of these would have to be paying the annual ground rent, where just now maybe they're not having to pay anything at all. And I certainly know that that's the case in Glasgow and Paisley and places like that. That is actually land and property which is probably quite valuable and could be used, but it's giving people basically the incentive to know that if they don't use it, either sell it or give it away or develop it in some sort of way, then they're going to get hit with paying the tax. So land and property will become a liability unless it's stewarded properly.
I wonder if I could ask a question, please. There's a lot in what you say commended with regard to the land ownership in Scotland, but I feel that what you're proposing is a very blunt instrument when it comes to business. If you take an example in Aberdeen, just for example, of two companies in Aberdeen occupying the same amount of land, one is incredibly profitable and paying a huge corporation tax at the moment, and the other one isn't making very much money and is paying very little corporation tax. They'll both pay the same under your system, because they both occupy the same amount of land. On the one hand, Scotland will lose a huge amount of taxation income, because the company that wouldn't be paying all the corporation tax will pay none of that, just pay the land rent. And the other company that's struggling will have to pay more than they were paying in corporation tax at the moment. They may go out of business, and the company that's making a lot of money will pay less. So I think you need something much more sophisticated to deal with business.
Well, I take your point, but it goes back actually to the stewardship of the land and what you do with your land, and regardless of whether you're more profitable or not, the point is how the land and the property is used. Now, there might be something actually in saying, well, the guy who's not doing very well in his business, this is a wake-up call for him actually to consider, how to do it in a different way. And the point about somebody making a huge amount of profit, the idea behind this is to show that we can raise more money than is raised just now through public funding to get us basically over the finishing line for independence, so people can actually see that we have got this money. And I would have thought that if we have a system whereby we can prove and we can actually produce this money, then that is probably more important than worrying too much about whether there is somebody who's earning more than another is paying, or is making bigger savings than somebody who's earning less. Now, it could well be that after 3 or 4 or 5 years, we would need to review the behaviour of people who are done very well, particularly well under this system, and to see whether they are actually using the money which they've got to reinvest in Scotland and all the rest of it. And if they're not, then there may well be a case that we would need to say, well, we have to fine tune this in some sort of way. But the importance behind this and the principle behind this was actually to raise the money, first of all, to show that we've got more than enough money, to give people a good universal citizens' income, apart from anything else, because otherwise what's going to happen is you're going to continue to have this very, very complicated taxation system in Scotland and the UK. We've got 17,000, I think, pages to the tax log in the UK. It's a charter for people to avoid it and evade it if they can. I would have thought it was far better to have a very simplified bureaucracy whereby this we don't have the cost of administering it. They say that HMRC, just the cost of administering it, is £3.4 billion a year. So if you consider a Scottish version of that, you're probably talking about £300 million a year. I would prefer to see that money actually used to help people rather than basically just to prop up an administration. So that's the theory behind it. But it could well be that we would need to review things after a few years, basically to see what whether those who were making the most out of it, whether they were sort of putting much more back than what they were what they were benefiting from. Yes.
You're talking about a universal citizens' income, but you're talking about £200 a week. You're talking about robotics as well, like this technology revolution. I don't think you're necessarily taking into account in those figures about the amount of job losses that's going to come with that, especially in retail. I mean, it's already started. There's lots of, and it does dramatically affect sort of low-skilled employment areas. And £200 a week, if people are unemployed or they're disabled and can't work, you can't really live off that, especially if you're part of a family and you're talking about replacing social security with this citizen's income. And then even if you include a social security system to sort of accommodate for this, I don't know how the figures necessarily all add up, because there's still then administration fees of that, so I don't know how the figures necessarily all tie in with the citizen's income when it's just even the tax, personal tax allowance is the way to go up 8th of April to 12,500. So to be paid just under £10,000 a year in citizen's income, it's fine if you're in employment, but if you find yourself unemployed or out of work due to long-term health issues, what do you do?
Could I perhaps come in there? I actually do a lot of work with benefits claimants and disabilities. You're not looking at £200 a week. You're looking at £73.10 a week.
I totally agree.
Yeah, people I work with would think they were in heaven if they were getting £200 a week.
I totally agree you can't live on what you currently get, but I also don't believe if you're a family, for example, that you can live on £200 a week either.
But it's not a family.
They're having to live in a lot less if they're unemployed.
But under this system, every member of the household would get a universal citizen's income of £10,000 a week. So if there's 4 in the household, that's £40,000 a year.
Okay.
Okay. And it's considerably more than the state pension. £10,000 a year is more than the state pension. Just now. Yes. Right. Do you want a break?
Well, yep. Sooner or later.
Okay. Well, I'll take one more. I'll take this gentleman here.
Have you had any discussions, feedback, support from Andy Whiteman at the Green Party who wrote the Poor of No Law?
Well, I don't think Andy Whiteman and the Greens are radical enough, to be quite honest with you. The Greens, and I might be doing them an injustice, but I think that generally speaking, they want to tax almost for the sake of taxation. There's always an element of more tax rather than actually looking at something to replace something with something else. One form of tax with something else. So I've not had a discussion with Andy Whiteman on this, but I've presented it now to 3 government ministers. There's been several MPs, MSPs who've seen it. The last government minister, I'll not mention the name yet, but has indicated that very interested in the concept. It goes against the grain, of what Andrew Wilson was talking about in his Sustainable Growth Commission, because basically he really doesn't mention land at all. And it's very much a sort of traditional neoliberal banking background view that I think he has taken, which I don't want an independent Scotland just to be a kind of smaller version of Britain, Germany, Denmark or whatever. I want us to basically do our own thing and find out and develop what is most appropriate for us. So that's the reason really I got involved in this in the first place. Okay.
Hello. I wanted to say just a couple of very short things. I was involved in an advisory capacity with a business, a small business, a few years ago. Turnover £500,000, and with all the costs, a director, 50% of that company took home over 5 years an average of £8,000 per year. An HMRC to over 100,000 a year. Now that's no way to live when you're running a business effectively as a government slave. £8,000, as we all know, is far less than minimum wage. So to implement a land value tax, we have to be very careful, and we have to be particularly careful in speaking to government ministers or maybe members of the parliament who've never done anything other than politics. And the second short thing I want to say is, I know a couple of guys, working class guys, and there is unfortunately a socially, collectively held idea that small business people are rich. But mostly, the example the gentleman here gave of one company doing very well, that's the exception. That is not the norm. So the second little story is these two guys, proper grafters, got a VAT investigation. His mother was sick. He just had a child, and it crippled them. So we need to be, yes, we need to get rid of the 17,000 pages, you know, that people create when they're in secondment from PricewaterhouseCoopers or some other ridiculous place like that, when they go into Treasury, and then they go back and they use it to avoid the tax. We do need to get rid of all that stuff and do what Denmark did when Hitler became Chancellor, as you said, and just start with a clean slate. But we can't take 5 years to do it, because so many small businesses are going to go right bust in that time. And why are there so many places empty in the high street in Glasgow, Edinburgh, Aberdeen? It's because of the taxation system.
Well, you know, I accept really everything you're saying there, and that's one of the reasons why this system has been designed, to make it as simple and as straightforward for people as possible. I know that the vast majority of small businesses actually struggle in this country. There are some that do very, very well, but the vast majority don't. So, as a result of that, you know, if they've only got to think of the AGFFR that they're going to pay, plus they're going to have a universal citizen's income of £10,000 a year, that's going to help them. And I know, for example, and I mean, I've got a daughter, one of my daughters is an artist, and to try in the first few years it was very, very difficult for her to make ends meet at all. And unless she'd had the support of myself and my wife, she probably wouldn't have continued to be an artist. So people like that, as I'm talking about creatives, you know, if they're actually allowed to develop their talents, you know, without the fear of knowing that they've got to actually make a living right away out of, you know, just starting a business, then, you know, this offers them that opportunity. Because the thing about also education, you know, we get some adverse comments about the curriculum for excellence, but actually the curriculum for excellence is what is going to drive things. It's all about creativity and actually applying knowledge, you know, to different situations in life. And you know, that's the way it's going to go. That is a creative way of looking at things, particularly when so much of what we're going to is going to require to be done is going to be done by machines and all the rest of it. So it's actually providing at least some basic source that everyone has has a source of funding for at least a fulfilling life and not just an existence. And I think that that's the way societies are going to have to go to meet the challenges ahead. Because if not, then what's going to happen is there's going to be social unrest. And that's one of the things which, you know, when you talk about people with money to invest in the future, whether it's in stock exchanges or other things, all these people that are involved in giving advice of where your pension pots are going to be invested, they're actually going to have to take into account things such as the effects of globalization and robotics, but also, you know, the dangers of social unrest and revolution. And these are the sort of things that we've got to kind of think about. One of the things which I, and in fact Doug we were at a meeting in Alexandria, and Ian Lawson, who was a senior member of the SNP for a number of years, but he had business interests in Estonia, and he went to Estonia just after Estonia left the Soviet Union, and he built up some businesses over there. And he was telling us about how Estonia developed after they regained their independence. And what they basically did was this: they looked at the most advanced countries in the world, and they said, well, we don't just want to match the advanced countries in the world, we want to do what they will be thinking of doing in 10 years' time. And as a result of that, Estonia is digitally probably the most advanced country in the world now. These are the sort of things that we've got to think about, in our path towards independence, and so that we are really, really ahead of the game. So I accept, what you're saying, that, we've got to be extremely careful that we do not marginalise and adversely affect existing businesses. But there should also always be the idea at the back of any business person's mind is, am I using the land and the property that I've got, most productively too? Okay, is there another question? Yes.
I'm not a farmer, but I rub shoulders with a lot of farmers, and when I'm trying to sell independence to them, the thing they say to me, see that Nicola Surgeon, she wants our land off of us. Now, what you're proposing here would have the effect of reducing land prices, which one of the things they rely on increasing land prices to maintain part of their income. They can remortgage and renegotiate each of the loans. We're already subsidising them, to provide our food, which is okay. It gives us cheap food in the supermarkets, but we're going to have to subsidise them further to keep them in business. Is that, do you think we'll have to keep subsidising them, or?
Well, did everyone hear that question? No.
The question after somebody's asked it, that's probably the easiest.
Yeah.
You can then hear what the question is.
Okay, the gentleman was talking about farmers, and that they require subsidy in order to, to survive and develop, and also in some cases they've got to remortgage their land or sell a bit of their land or whatever, to make ends meet. And it was the effect of something such as AGFFR on them. Now, first of all, I think most farmers are probably tenant farmers in Scotland rather than owner-occupiers, albeit there's a fair number of owner-occupiers too. But apart from that, with this system, the figures that I've put in place does not affect the amount of subsidy in the round which goes to farmers. Now, obviously, that is something which is going to be under review anyway, because of Brexit and whatever money the Scottish Government has, to subsidise farmers. So that actual amount of money is not affected by that. The other thing is, of course, they will also get their £10,000 for each member of their household in the universal citizens' income. And the other thing too is that there is not an incentive in a lot of farmers to actually get rid of some of the land, because I live rurally, and I know all the farms near me, that there's always a bit of land which is never developed, it's never cultivated, it's never used for stock or whatever. So in my opinion, humble opinion, there's always land which could be used for alternative purposes. Now, one of the things I've proposed at previous SNP conferences is that there should be deemed planning permission for time limited for 4 homesteads in every farm in Scotland, and that would dramatically reduce the cost of land, but it would also enable landowners and farmers in order to offload some of the land which they don't use, and also encourage the repopulation of rural Scotland. So there are all sorts of things that you can do. There's also the fact that I think most farmers who actually do well, there's a value added content to it. So whether it's they've got a haulage business, or whether they've got a farm shop or something a bit more sophisticated, there's all these kind of things which I think are got to be part of the mix. I live in an area not so very far from Glasgow, within half an hour's drive of Glasgow, but we have a real problem of depopulation. I was on the Development Trust for Luss and Arden for a number of years, and ourselves, the Community Council, the Kirk that's very strong in our area, even Luss Estates, we all got together to decide, what we reckon was a blueprint for the next 30 years of our community. And the reason we did that was that we only had 7 kids in our primary school, and we were really scared it was going to close. Now Luss gets about 500,000 tourists every year, and it's not a particularly pleasant place to live at certain times of year because there are all these tourists, but it's not managed by the local authority. So we had identified 40 places where houses could be built in our community. Some were going to be social housing, some was going to be for rent, some was going to be for purchase, some was going to be self-development, whatnot. And we agreed that, and we went to the National Park, who are our planning authority, and they refused to allow it because they said any housing had to be tourist related. So that just shows you, the problems that you can have with the dead hand of officialdom. Fortunately, after about 5 years, they're now changing our tune a bit. So there are all these sort of things affecting, rural life, which have got to be addressed. But I think the important thing is that, depopulation in a rural society is not just in the kind of margins and the outland areas of Scotland. It's also really close to our major centres of population too. Yes.
So if I give you my neighbour's address,
Yes.
will you tell me how much AGFFR he's going to pay?
Yeah, I'll work it out for him. If you email me, just email me these figures and I'll work it out, and you can give him hopefully a pleasant surprise. Yes.
So you're approaching this from, I suppose, almost primarily from the perspective of raising revenues. And I completely agree with you that the current political parties aren't being sort of creative or radical enough in how they're approaching this problem. When you've given any of these talks previously, have you encountered any questions about modern monetary theory?
In respect, so far as...
in respect to under the modern monetary theory, there is no requirement for a currency controlling government to raise taxes in order to have enough money to pay its bills. You raise taxes in order to control inflation and to do other things, but you don't actually need to raise taxes to make money because you have enough of that anyway.
Okay. Did everyone hear that?
No.
Right. Right, well, Jenny was talking about monetary theory, which basically says that government doesn't need to raise tax, in order to provide for public services. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, that kind of thing. No, I've not had that. That approach has not been made to me. I mean, I take the view that if we want to be in control of our own destiny, if we can raise the money ourselves that we need for public funds from Scotland, from our land, and it's a constant, it's not something that's going to disappear or whatever, that is a far better position to be in, and that allows people who are innovative and all the rest of it, and all the other assets which we have in this country, to develop. And hopefully, that will be the basis on which, going forward with generations, that we will, we will have a sound basis on which to, to build our economy. If we look at Norway, for example, people will be fed up hearing about Norway, but Norway has got not just this sovereign wealth fund, but they are in credit. They are not a debtor nation, and I don't know about you, but I would feel much more comfortable, and certainly, having run a business for a number of years, I've attempted to run a business without any debt. Now, accountants will say that's crazy, but it just means that when you are faced with some big issue or some big problem, such as the financial crash in 2008, it's easier to muddle along until to survive. So I think we should always be kind of mindful of these things, and that's really I'm probably quite simplistic in these matters, or simple in it, but that's the way I view it. Yes.
Yes, this is not so much a question, but I'm much more concerned. This is comparatively new to me, and I'm very pleased to hear of a rather more radical view than has been put forward so far, which I must say I find incredibly frustrating. But I would like to think that we put rather more emphasis on quality of life. Now, I work with people with disabilities specifically in terms of benefits. I advise, I support, I go to tribunals. It's an absolutely horrendous system, and it is horrendously expensive. For one hearing for personal independence payments, you have a lawyer, a doctor, and a disability expert, yeah, which is a bit of a fuzzy area. You have a clerk, you have a building, you have security agents. And if you have a poor soul that once swore at a doctor's receptionist over the phone, you have 2 security guards, despite the fact that the poor soul can only walk with 2 crutches. But is considered a potentially violent individual. If these people were getting £200 a week, they would think they were an absolute clover, and we would save all of this, and we would, I suspect, pretty well overnight halve our mental health problems. Because I've seen people now over a period of more than 10 years that keep coming back because they keep having their benefits reviewed. So I've seen some of them over a great many years. And, you know, they start off relatively positive, you know, they've just been diagnosed, well, this is something I've got to live with, you know, this is something that the benefits is something I've got to go through, I've got to adapt my life to fit. And I watch them deteriorating mentally over time as they have to go through the same mill over and over again. And the other aspect of the citizens' income, which I feel particularly passionately about, is the option for a parent to remain at home with their young child and not be pushed into this, you're only a real person if you're out working. You never get that time back. I mean, yes, nurseries can be valuable. All sorts of socialisation of young children can be very valuable. But so can time spent with a parent or a close carer. And it would allow that option for people. And I think that quality of life aspects are something that has been almost totally ignored.
I mean, I couldn't agree more. And in addition to the universal citizens' income, you know, people who have got particular special needs, whether they're, you know, they're greatly disabled or whatever, you know, they would still be entitled to more. There would still be a system whereby they would get more according to their needs. But you know.
But £200 a week.
Oh, I know, basically. Well, that's right. But even more than that, you know, as I'm talking to you about, you know, the life-work balance and the quality of life, what is going to happen is that people will naturally be working less hours than probably they're working just now. Now, we've had this attitude in Scotland, Britain, probably, that, you know, if you don't work long hours, you're not impressing your boss. Whereas there's some other societies that will say, well, you're just inefficient. You know, so you've got to think in terms of that. And one thing that we did in my office 2 years ago, we introduced team working, and we also reduced the core hours of our business from 35 hours a week to 25 hours a week with no loss of salary, on the basis that the staff could do the same amount of work in 25 hours as they did in 35 hours, they would get the same salary. And it took basically about 2 years to bring it in. But we did it on the basis of a shift system. So we were open the first shift was 8 till 1 and then 1 till 6. And what happened was that people that had young families didn't need to spend the money on childcare because they had more time to spend with their children. And also people that maybe had older relations who were going to a number of hospital appointments, things like that, they had time to take them themselves.
It would certainly improve my work-life balance because, I mean, I'm 71 I actually work longer hours as a volunteer
Yeah.
now than I have ever worked in 30 years of a working life.
Yes.
And I wish somebody would do something to assist this, because then there might be more demand for what I do, and I might be able to have a better work-life balance, spend more time with my grandson.
Well, you see, if people have got more time, to do things that they want to do or they're keen to do, then, that should be encouraged, because we all benefit from that. I mean, there's an army of volunteers, always has been an army of volunteers in this country, unsung heroes doing things, and that's something that I think we should, should be encouraged. And if we can provide the time and the money, because the money is important for people, because people are motivated by knowing that that they can live a comfortable and fulfilling life. It's so much more difficult, when they're on the margins. So if we can do something along these lines, then I would certainly, urge the politicians to do something about it. Anyone else? Oh yes, sorry.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, I'd like to thank you for a really interesting presentation. But it's almost like there's a lot in it, but it's almost too simple, and then it's lots of other questions come in, small questions that there's just too many to think of. So I just wondered if you could give examples of where you've seen something like this, some system that is working that is similar.
Right. Well, there's no. Lady was asking if there's a similar system elsewhere. I suppose the short answer to that is no. Well, I've not found one. But there are systems of land value taxation in different parts of the world, and Derek Mackay instructed the Land Commission to first of all consider and get a report on different systems of land value taxation. And if you go onto the Land Commission's website, you can read that report. I don't know why they instructed the University of Reading to do the report rather than a Scottish university, but there again, who am I to judge? But basically, what they did was they found out that there were different countries that have systems. So you've got Singapore has a system. Some of the states, United States, have had actually a system since they got independence. Canada, a couple of the Canadian provinces have them. South Africa has a system. I think some of the Australian states have as well. Denmark brought in a system when they abolished the feudal system, or it wasn't the aristocracy, it was the feudal system they abolished in about 1850. But the aristocrats were still pretty powerful, so they started bringing traditional taxation like income tax, etc. And now, despite the fact they're said to be the happiest people in the world, they're also the most taxed people in the world. But that's another story. But so there are different systems, but there isn't a system, to my knowledge, that is as simple and as straightforward as this, based on a square meterage, which is basically how we've developed that.
Okay.
Anyone else? Gentlemen, give the answers.
I really like the idea of a land tax and a universal basic income and a citizen's income, which is why I joined the Green Party. But what I want to know, or what I'm curious is, I haven't heard anything that relates to independence. We could do this tomorrow, because local taxation is evolved, we can implement, we can replace the council tax. But my worry is I would pay the same amount as the poor folk in the flats below me, regardless of how much I earn and how much they earn. And the last person trying to do that failed. And I would be really concerned that we go down that route and it leads to riots.
Right, well, the last time that was done, when the poll tax basically was, I suppose, introduced, we had all these other taxes. So whether it was 17,000 pages in the logbook, or whether it was 10,000, it doesn't matter. It was still a very, very complicated and a multi-layer tax system that we had in the UK.
I pay the same if I was unemployed or earning £1 million a year, as long as I don't move house.
Yes, under this system, yes, that's correct. That's right. But that there are. Everyone's not going to be the same winner, but 95%, as far as the sort of research I've done, about 95% of people will win and will be better off than they are just now. So, if the Scottish Government were going to introduce this now, that would drive a considerable wedge between us and the rest of the UK. Because, you could just imagine, folk in down south be saying, well, why can they afford a universal citizen's income and we can't, etc. But by driving that wedge, and the very fact that, the money in people's pockets is greater in Scotland than it is in England, then, that would be an incentive, I think, to encourage people to vote yes. Because let's face it, the reason that we lost the last time was that an awful lot of people were really quite comfortable financially in the position that they were in. They had a reasonable job, they had a house with a mortgage that they could cope with, they went on their foreign holidays and all the rest of it. So, they were assessing the risk, and it was all done in risk. So were they going to take that risk? Now, if they're not politically engaged insofar as believing that in their soul that they want Scottish independence, they might quite like the notion, but in order for them to actually vote yes, a lot of them are going to have to see, well, what's in it for me, because it's a very personal decision people have got to make. So if with this system, if it was introduced, they would find different varying degrees yes, but they would find that they had more money in their pocket, and also that there was a system of security that, if their businesses belly up, or they're made unemployed, that they have a level of income which they might not enjoy just now. So from that point of view, I think that it would enhance the appeal of independence. And in fact, the Westminster government would absolutely hate it. If we did this, and as a result of that, even if Mrs. May says she's not going to agree to a Section 30 agreement, I actually think that the threat of them removing this right and this money would be so overwhelming that that we would just basically become independent, because people would see it was in their financial interest, even if they didn't believe with all their heart and soul that Scotland should be independent. Yes.
I've got a question that relates to that. Part of the devolution, you said that, well, this in terms of devolution, you said that a big part of this is that if property taxes are paid after 3 years, then the land is then repossessed by the Scottish Government. So does the Scottish Government have that power under the current settlement, or is that something we would actually need to get independence to influence?
Well, the Scottish Government has the power to introduce local taxes. So there's nothing to stop the Scottish Government from introducing a form of land valuation taxation such as this or any other one. It's also got the power to introduce a local income tax, which was proposed away back in 2007 election by the SNP, but for certain reasons they didn't go ahead with it. So it can introduce different taxes. That's not the problem. It's really just having the will to do it.
Repossession of the land if people don't pay it, do they have that power?
Well, no, because basically what happens just now is that the taxes which you have, whether it's your council tax or well, income tax is different, because basically income tax is still payable even though your tax on your earned income goes to the Scottish. It goes eventually to the Scottish Government. It's still paid to HMRC, and they then pay it in lump sum to the Scottish Government. So it's actually HMRC that if you didn't pay your income tax, it's still HMRC who would pursue you. But what would happen there is that just now, if the Scottish Government brought in another form of tax and you didn't pay it, then basically that would be a personal debt, and they would sue you through the courts as a personal debtor. So there is no tax that they have just now over which they have a security over the title to your property, but under this they would have.
So this is something we would need independence for?
No, they have the power to bring that in just now. So for example, a mortgage lender in Scotland, despite the fact that mortgages are basically arranged on the same terms throughout the UK. Because we've got a separate legal system in Scotland, there's separate legislation creating what are called standard securities, and these are the bonds, or these are the bonds which attach or charged to your title, so you cannot sell a house without paying off the debt, or if you remortgage it, the money from the remortgage got to be. So I mean that is within the power of the Scottish government, the Scottish Parliament to legislate for. So we wouldn't need independence to bring in a system where basically a charge could be put on on all titles. For example, local authorities just now and Scottish Government have the power to put a charge or a notice on your property if, for example, it's not being repaired. If it's derelict or semi-derelict and it becomes dangerous or whatever. The power from that comes from Scottish legislation, it doesn't come from legislation from Westminster. So there is undoubtedly the power to do that. Similarly, there would be the power to impose the annual ground rent payment on establishments which are owned by the British government. So for example, the Faz Lane base, naval bases, military bases, etc. The Scottish government would have the power to do that. Just now, it's not excluded within the Scotland Act legislation. Sorry, yes.
Sorry, just 2 points. One, you said that we don't need independence for this, but you also sort of simultaneously said we'd still have to pay all the taxes to HMRC. So until we're independent, this is just another tax. We can't get out of paying income tax to HMRC.
No. Well, the way it would work under devolution would be if the Scottish Government uses this form of AGFFR to raise all the money and more for public services through this. While we are still members of the UK, as personal taxpayers and corporate taxpayers, you would still be liable to pay the UK imposed taxes such as VAT, corporation tax, tax on your investments, capital gains tax, all these kind of taxes. However, under the fiscal agreement between the Scottish Government and the UK Government, we get the Barnett consequentials, we get a sum of money, a block grant from Westminster, which we are still legally entitled to while we are still part of the United Kingdom. Now, with that money, that extra money, basically the Scottish Government could reimburse Scottish personal and corporate taxpayers the amount which is levied by the UK. Now you may say, but there's no precedent for that, but there is a precedent for that, because the Westminster Government have made arrangements to reimburse senior members of the armed forces who are Scottish taxpayers who now have to pay £100, £200 more because they're having to pay the higher rates of tax which are employed here. So they've actually created the precedent for that already. It's not the Scottish Government, but the UK Government. Yes?
I'm not sure that would work, but you're right, it's a solution. The second point is, you talk about using this system to fund the citizens' income.
Mm-hmm.
When would that start? Because we don't have the money to simultaneously implement this system and start the citizens' income. So when would a citizens' income after this system, which is used to fund the citizens' income, when would that actually start?
Well, it could start simultaneously with it, because basically you're not. The payments that people are making, just as you pay possibly 10 payments for your council tax just now, you pay 10 payments, monthly payments for your land value taxation or annual ground rent, whatever you want to call it. So the money is coming in as it's going out. So it's not as if you're paying money out before you're getting it in. You wouldn't be paying the £10,000 in one fell swoop. Somebody would be paying it over a period of months if they're getting £200 a week. So the money would be there. It's not about paying it out and then getting it back in. Yes, Greg.
I was thinking, because this would be a tax that would be levied by local authorities, yeah?
Possibly.
Aye, because I'm thinking, so then how do we fund national spending? Would the government kind of make local authorities give them money? Because then I'm also thinking, how do you stop, for example, all the Tories in East Renfrewshire deciding to elect a Tory council who goes, we're going to charge nothing because we don't want to pay money on land and we're just getting money from the Scottish Government to pay for things.
Well, under what the model that I've shown you, just again for simplicity's sake, I've basically shown a national rate for 4 types of land type. But you could devolve part of that and give the power to local authorities to charge their own rate for a certain amount. Now, I'm a great believer in the devolution of powers to local authorities, and I think there should be far more, because we only have 32 in Scotland. In Norway, I think there's over 400. So we should be empowering people in small communities and all the rest of it, to basically run their own councils. So the question, I suppose, would be, how many powers would you wish to devolve to local communities? Now, I think it's Sweden where something like 85% of all the money which is collected in national income tax actually goes to local communities because their system of, I think it's health is much more devolved than ours is. But so you can do that, but it's a question of choice. If you empower people to make choices, then that's up to them. So if you get Tories in East Renfrewshire that say, right, we're going to not provide these services because we're not going to charge the money, well, the people will suffer because they'll not have these services. But at least then the councillors will actually be more answerable, to their electorate, and less money will come in block from the Scottish Government, and more will come from what they actually raise themselves. And in a place like East Renfrewshire, they could probably raise quite a considerable amount of money for the way that particular area has been developed. Because yes, there's a lot of big houses, but there's a lot of big gardens, and most of them are serviced by Scottish Water, so they'd be paying at the higher end. Yes.
One of the things that you're trying to accomplish is to make a more productive use of land and to encourage people to make good use of their land. The downside that I might see to that is encouraging rapid, aggressive development of what we might consider to be natural spaces and wild spaces and things like that. How do you approach that?
Well, of course, the planning regime would still be in place. You would still need planning permission if you wanted to do a development. Now, you might say that there would be pressure on the planners to be more accommodating in some proposals or not. That is a question of judgment of the planners, you might well find. I think what you would find is, because most of the funding comes from urban Scotland, and really it's as a result of land which is not used or properties which are underused or derelict, that I don't actually think that you would find that the pressure would be on the green spaces, to the same extent. The other thing is that we've never really had an imperative to actually think how we steward our green spaces, what we do with them, and what they could be used for and improved upon. So if we take something like cemeteries, an awful lot of the cemeteries in Scotland are not well looked after at all. But if you go to a place like Vienna, it's a place that you actually quite want to go to, not because you're ghouls or something like that, but actually because they're really interesting and beautiful places, and they have nurseries and garden nurseries and things like that round the borders of them. So there are ways that you can actually improve the cost or defray the cost to some extent of these things. There's all these things to think about. Also, Scotland, is largely, the land is marginal and it's quite bare, particularly on the west coast. It wasn't always like that. There were trees, there were trees, most of Scotland were trees. I've got a friend who was asked by the National Trust, what were they going to do, what should they do to improve Goatfell and Arran? And he said, grow trees. And he said, oh, we can't do that. And he says, well, that's what was there originally. So it's thinking about these things and how these can be harvested. We're talking now about hemp. I think at the SNP conference, the draft resolution, there's a proposal regarding the growing of hemp and things of that nature. There's all sorts of things. If we just open our mind to what could be done, I find when I'm out in the car, I'll see a bit of land and say, I wonder what that could be used for. And that's really what it's all about. It's opening your mind to the possibilities. because all land has a value of some description. It might not be financial initially, but you know, there is a value, whether environmentally, socially, or whatever, and just recreationally, there is a value to that.
I've got a question.
Yes.
I wasn't laughing at your idea of reimbursement. I was just laughing at the possibility of what a genius idea that is. You were saying that the armed forces people are reimbursed because of the consequentials, if you like, of the new implementation of the Scottish tax system. I think that's potentially a brilliant idea, because we can say to them, well, you've already done this, we can do it too, it's fine, when they complain. But I had another thought, which was, what are your thoughts on oil and gas, which they keep telling us raises no money at all, but we all know raises huge volumes of money. And of course, it's not devolved. And then there's the whiskey, the tax on the whiskey. There's the oncoming, going to come on stream, lots of it on stream already. The wind power, 25% of Europe's wind power. What are your thoughts on these three things, and whether the English government is ever going to let go of this?
Well, on things such as oil, whiskey, and the like, if we're independent, you know, we've got to let go of them, because they'll be part of the realm of Scotland. They won't be part of the realm of the UK. But
in terms of a tax system, where we implement your system, or something a bit more refined, and they say to us, I mean, this would certainly be a good lever to let people see there are big differences between us and them. But what are your thoughts in terms of the oil, the gas, the wind power, the whiskey, all the other things that we can offer?
You're talking about, well, we're still part of the UK?
Yes, I am.
Yeah. Well, that's why I'm trying to illustrate the fact that we can raise more than enough money to cover public spending in Scotland, and that's without the tax from whiskey, without the tax from the oil and all the rest of it, and all these kind of things. Yes, but so I've left these out of the equation so that we can prove. But these are still assets which we've got, which will be of far greater benefit to us, you know, once we're independent. So that would be another reason, you know, why people, having already received the benefits of a system such as this, would see, well, these are the additional benefits which we would have. And that's it. But, you know, such as I said to you, you know, the seabed, you know, you could actually charge an annual ground rent in the seabed. And it might well be that the Scottish Government, for example, would say, well, you know, if there are certain structures or whatever, then, you know, they would impose this tax based on that. Similarly with pylons in the ground, or, you know, even offshore, windmills and things of that nature, you know, you could have a separate rate for rent as another type of land type for that. So, you know, the possibilities for that's endless. I actually tried to find out how many pylons there were in Scotland, but I couldn't find it out, you know, just to see if I could work something out on those lines. I dare say between Scottish Power and Scottish Hydro, or whatever they call them, SSE, you know, I would be able to find that out. I couldn't find that out on the internet, but, you know, that's a possibility as well.
Right, folks, shall we stop it there? I mean, Graeme will be staying on after